I had this vision of myself as this sort of slick Republican political operative who was going to be the West Wing kind of guy. And I had this vision that that's who I was, but that's not really who I was. I was too contrarian. I was too artistic, too sensitive, really,
Yeah.
probably to be that. And that's when I discovered that writing about politics was way more fun and revolutionary and contrarian and artistic
Kind of romantic too, right?
and
You have this,
romantic. That's yeah.
yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Don't and Shrink. And today, if you've been lucky enough to experience some of our prized political commentary here in the DMV, our next guest might look quite familiar to you. Contributing columnist for the LA Times and The Hill, author of Filthy Rich Politicians and Too Dumb to Fail, Matt Lewis. Hi, Matt.
Hey,
Thanks for being
Daffney.
with us.
Good to see you.
You too. Now, I also admit that some more background on Matt is that he's a dad, he's a husband, and he's a diehard Baltimore Orioles fan. So I chose my outfit today in solidarity. I don't know how well their season is going this year, but I
Yeah,
figure this was the way to
we need
cheer them
help.
on.
We need
Okay.
solidarity.
All right. Is this like a backwards, sort of a backwards cap thing, what I'm doing, right? I figured it's friendly territory. Matt, thank you for joining us. I have to tell you, I have some firsthand knowledge on Matt and his story and how similar and things that we have found together that we have in common. And I really wanted to share that with our audience today. Um, Matt, tell us a little bit about your work. Tell me about the best part of your work. You know, that's a typical DC question, right?
Yeah. Well, on one hand, it's a tough gig, right? I mean, the industry, the journalism industry, is in a tough time right now. Like, obviously, ever since newspapers started going away, there's AI, there's the media fragmentation, there's Donald Trump. So, on one hand, it's a tough job. On the other hand, wow, it's not even a job. It's like a blessing. I mean, I get to like hang out at my house, see my family, and write about ideas and topics. And sometimes it could be Sydney Sweeney. Sometimes it could be Donald Trump. Whatever is in the news, I'm usually writing about it and talking about it. And what makes it cool, I think the best part of it is not to be like melodramatic, because I do realize, trust me, I realize that most of what I say and write doesn't matter. But the cool thing is that every once in a while it does. There's a quote from the playwright Tom Stoppard where one of his characters says, writers can't move the world. I'm paraphrasing. Writers don't push the world, but every once in a while they can nudge it a little bit.
Now,
And so
I'm not gonna let
that's
you
the
shrink in
beauty.
that moment. I won't let you and I say that it's very self-deprecating on your part, but you're an educator, Matt. If I can be honest, my association with politics in the 20 years I've been living here in the DNB, I wanted to stay away from it as much as possible. It was almost polarizing. You couldn't have a conversation with a Republican and a Democrat in the same room. And you did the opposite for me, and you made politics very palatable. So if you get a chance to read one of Matt's books, it really is palatable. It is based in history and thought and, perspective, and the idea that this is part of our fabric. This is part of our country's fabric and the way things are going. Um, and that doesn't change. Those ideas don't change. And you are an educator, and we'll dig into that a little
Yeah.
further. You made it palatable for me, somebody who is not into politics at all. And there's one particular term that you taught me in our time together, working together, that I had to learn more about. It was
Mm.
crunchy con. Can you
Oh,
tell me more
yeah.
about that?
Yeah, no, actually, so one of my favorite books, it's probably 20 years old now, but it's by a writer named Rod Dreher, and it's called Crunchy Cons. And basically, the premise is, uh, you know, if think about where the world was 20 years ago, where the Republican Party and where conservatism was 20 years ago, at the time it was perceived to be very buttoned up. A conservative was someone who sort of looked like George Will, who wore a bow tie and that sort of thing. But Crunchy Cons looked at it a little differently, and it talked about there's people out there in America who are in many ways conservative, but they're traditionalists. They maybe they live in a rural area and they go to farmers markets and they wear Birkenstocks um, and
Yeah.
they care about things like conservation. They're conservatives in that regard. And so I think it's a very long subtitle, but part of it said something to
Yeah.
do with Birkenstock Burkians. I remember
Okay.
being,
Okay. Yeah.
so like they read Edmund Burke, but they wear Birkenstocks. And these people do exist, and I think actually probably a little more prominent today. We've
I think we're
learned in
all,
recent
yeah.
years that like Tucker Carlson and Ann Coulter are big fans of the Grateful Dead. And so I don't know if that makes them crunchy cons, but
I
yeah,
mean,
you kind of get the vibe.
they're gonna have to identify. They're gonna have to put it on their subject line or that's their identifiers. Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think we're also in a world, and we won't go too deep into politics, but it's hard to not recognize that you're in the middle in some ways, and that there are so many different dynamic opportunities to engage in either party, and there's not just two parties. And I think your education even reaches further with that, as we're learning that that polarizing of things going on actually teaches us further where we actually stand. Um,
Yeah, well, look, I can tell you myself that once Donald Trump came along and really shook up the paradigm, because there used to be like a conservative orthodoxy, right? Like we were against tariffs, for example.
it
Um, and you go down the list, there's so many things. We were very anti-Russia. Donald Trump seems to be more pro-Russia. There's a whole
every
bunch of
80s
things, and
movie reminds us that. Yeah.
he shook
Yes.
things up,
Yeah.
and it really, in a weird way for me, was liberating. I learned that I had been um, sort of outsourcing some of my views to just like I'm a conservative, therefore I believe all of these things that conservatives believe,
Yeah.
and once Donald Trump came along and sort of upset that apple cart, I think there were some negative externalities that came from that. But for me, one of the really positive outcomes was I no longer felt beholden, or the sense of having to be loyal to any party or cause anymore. And so it
Yeah.
really freed me up. And so I think I'm actually still am a conservative person in many ways. But it allowed me to like really, I don't, who cares what they say anymore, because they don't even believe, they're not even anti-terror.
That's
They've
right.
changed
That's
their
right.
positions. So it really freed me up to think for myself in a way that like I thought I was all the time, but now I know I really have.
I mean, even if we think about what the Republican Party looked like during the time of Lincoln, right?
Yeah.
Right? It's just it changes and it evolves and it adapts, and there's so much to learn, like, and I'm glad you're there for that. Now, you and I, speaking of being conservative, we both came from fairly conservative areas, right? Or backgrounds and environments, and that definitely shapes a lot of the ways that I think or I have thought over the times, and of course, that's evolved as I've become an adult and had my own experiences. But I think what we're seeing a lot of is children are only experiencing certain political affiliation based on their parents or their community or their environments. Is that changing now with the internet?
That's a great question. Yeah. Well, first, I'll tell you. So I'm from Wolfsville, Maryland, which is a little town between Frederick and Hagerstown, Maryland. They call it Western Maryland. It's actually North Central.
You've been kind enough to share a photo.
Yeah, and I've got one of me and my dad, I think, with a
Okay.
gun. It's so politically incorrect.
Yeah.
My dad was a prison guard for 30 years. He voluntarily went to jail so I could get paid to write about politics and go to college and all that stuff. I went to college in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. I live in West Virginia now. So I've got that. I feel like that gave me an understanding and appreciation of some rural traditional values. But I also lived and worked in the DC area for about 15 years. One of the places I worked was at the Daily Caller for Tucker Carlson. And, almost everyone I worked with there was super rich. It was unbelievable, and
Yeah.
so that gave me a different. I've experienced the political world from all sorts of different angles, and I do think it's been enlightening. But I think that is rare. Most people, I think, gotta get locked in, one or the other,
Yeah.
and that really shapes their political worldview. And if they're not careful, they start to believe that their beliefs are based on, I don't know, reason or logic, when it's just kind of based on their personal experience and what their
Familiarity. Yeah.
parents taught them,
What do
which
you
isn't
think?
all bad.
Yeah.
But I do think it's incumbent upon us, if you want to be an informed citizen, at some point as you age, to really reflect at whether the things that you believe are really what you believe because they're right, or if they're what you believe because that's what everyone where you grew up said.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a real coming into yourself moment, yeah. Now, you've been in politics for a long time, right? This is not
Yes,
your first gig, this is not your first job. In fact, I don't think I have a photo of your first day on the job in politics.
I'll send you one. I've got one.
Okay,
I
please.
really do.
Would you tell us about your earliest work?
I went to Shepherd College in West Virginia. My dad's a prison guard, so I don't know anything about, like, I didn't do a single internship. I ended up being a political science major partly because it was the only way I could graduate. You didn't have to have a foreign language. I kept failing Spanish. This is not a joke. I mean, I literally became a political science major. Just it's the only way I could graduate. There was some loophole that allowed me to get a degree. Um, I graduated in the late '90s. The economy is booming. I can't get a job, and I don't know how to get a job. I think the way to get a job is, I assume it's to look in the Frederick News Post and the
Yes,
classifieds,
right?
and apply, show up, look for the want ads, which is, even back then, was ridiculous.
Before the internet. Yeah.
That wasn't the way to do it back then. So I went to a headhunter, and they sent me to manage a fast food restaurant, and I was really miserable, and
Are
ended
you allowed
up.
to say the name of the fast food restaurant?
Yeah, I'll say it. It's Roy Rogers.
Nice.
They were
Good
actually
choice.
great. I
Yeah.
like Roy Rogers. Their food's terrific. They were really good to me. It just wasn't the right fit for me. I was pretty miserable for a bunch of reasons, not all their fault. But I kind of hit rock bottom, and I ended up volunteering on a political campaign,
Nice.
um, which had never occurred to me before to do, even though I was a political science major. No one told me I had to. It wasn't like a required. There were no internships that I had to do, and that really changed my life and started me. But originally, I thought I wanted to be a campaign political operative, which I did for a little bit,
Nice.
and I was pretty good at it initially. But but eventually, I realized that wasn't who I was
Yeah.
actually.
Wow. And, you didn't take up the band. You didn't we should tell you that Matt was actually in a band
Yes.
back in Maryland, and, maybe not the biggest extrovert either, but gained some skills, right? It's funny how the experiences that we have shape exactly who we've become. And it's right, on career day, no one told me that I could run a political campaign. During career day, nobody told me I could have a podcast. Maybe they do that now on career day, I don't know, in high school. But based on the experiences you have in life, and sometimes you fall into these things, I think that you and I sort of have that in common, where we didn't know something was available because we had no experience in it, but we met the right people, or we met the right opportunities. And when it came to starting on the campaign trail, did you ever wanna be a politician yourself?
Well, first, let me say, coming where I come from, there was literally one of my cousins didn't have indoor plumbing until we were in middle school. So that's, you got to realize the world I came from, and so, like, the idea that I could, even doing what I'm doing today, and I'm certainly by no means a household name or anything like that. But
Yet.
the idea that I would get to even just go on TV and talk about politics, like, the likelihood that I would be a rock star or a major league baseball player were just as likely. Like, if you had told my dad, your son's going to get to ride on the Straight Talk Express with John, interview John McCain, and he's going to go on. There's going to be this show called Morning Joe, or he's going to go on HBO's, Real Time with Bill Maher.
R
Like, that would have been just as absurd as telling him, he's going to be a famous rock star
Yeah.
or whatever. And so, the time that I was growing up, if you wanted to kind of make something of yourself and you were a little eccentric and maybe you had some delusions of grandeur, you know, joining a rock band wasn't the craziest idea, and it did force me to learn things about myself and to grow, like how to work with 3 or 4 other guys. We uh, as a writer, you do that. It's called collaboration,
Yep.
but you do it in a band with writing songs and performing and getting up on stage and performing. Overcoming nerves is something that I do now. Promoting the band, handing out flyers, trying to get people to come out to see your band, your group, because that's really what matters. Actually, not, it doesn't matter how good you sound, it's if you can get people
Yeah.
to tune in. It's amazing how it's very similar to what I do now. So it was a good training ground for me.
And we can expect a reunion tour coming up at some point, right?
Someday, yeah, we've talked
Okay,
about it.
good. Okay, it's in. Matt, when did you realize that the mold where you came from or what were you doing just wasn't a fit for you anymore? It didn't
Wow,
align.
I always knew to a certain degree that, like, I didn't really totally fit in with where I'm from. You know what I mean? Like my dad was this, pretty tall, pretty husky prison guard hunter. Like one year he killed 3 deer. I mean, all legally. It was bow and arrow, rifle, and muzzle loader. So it's
That's
pretty much the only back then. I think now there's more opportunities. The season's longer. They have an overpopulation of deer. Back then, you had to be really good to do what he did. And so, you know, we had sports in common. We liked watching Andy Griffith together, but like hunting, fishing, I wasn't that kind of guy.
yeah,
Construction, I never knew how to build that kind of thing. And I always, I would watch, TV kept me from being a redneck. I swear it did. I would turn on
I
TV
agree.
and see
Yeah,
these people living these kind of glamorous lives and be like, I want that. I want to be in 90210. I don't want to be like on Beverly Hillbillies. I want to be on 90210.
it's
So it
empowering,
gave
right?
me,
Yeah,
and I don't want to like criticize or dismiss my rural upbringing. That's part of me. But I
yeah.
also had this other part, which was the affinity for, that more glamorous style.
What's out there though,
That's
right?
part of
What
who.
else?
Yeah.
I joked earlier today when I was talking with a friend that a lot of my experience in life came from watching television, just
Yep.
because there was not a lot of other opportunity. In fact, I, to this day, thank Nick at Night reruns for understanding an entire generation or 2 of people.
Oh yeah.
Even to this day, I can make those references, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, I know that show, Dragnet," right? And it does, it brings people together, and sometimes that's the only thing connecting you to the people around you or to opportunity to see things differently.
Totally. I had a guy, I'll call him a protege, a young guy named Nick who interned for us at the Daily Caller. And he and I just kept in touch over the years and we're still friends. And I've tried to help him here and there because, I'm like 15 or 20 years older than him. But he had this, he had like 2 older brothers and they were really into pop culture. So he grew up, even though he's younger than me, he grew up watching like Jerry Maguire and As Good as It Gets, and like all these 90s movies that I went to see, at the
Yep.
theaters,
Yep.
even like 80s movies like Ferris Bueller. So like he and I could talk. He could talk. I think it was a big benefit to him.
The new
He
language,
could
right? It's a
talk to
full
people
language.
older than him about
Yeah.
media that they loved.
Pro tip for anybody who's coming in and trying to work some generational literacy into their hierarchy is just maybe watch some really inappropriate 90s films or 2000 in our case where, wow, I can't watch those things again. Um, that's huge. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. So there is a dynamic there where part of life was living it vicariously through some of these characters, or some of these situations that you and I would have not have had the experience to do. So I know who you weren't because it just wasn't an alignment for you. But who were you at 10 years old?
Well, at 10, I was a very nice boy. I was very sensitive and sweet and carefree And that's because at 10 years old, before I went to middle school.
Oof.
See, I went to this little elementary school called Wolfsville Elementary, and it became known as like the redneck school because what happened is all the good country kids, and there were some ornery, rough folks up there, but there was also a lot of just wholesome church going,
Yeah.
just mild
Yep.
mannered folks up there. We all got sent to this big Middletown. I don't even know about Middletown, Maryland. Think of like when Daniel LaRussa shows up, his first day of
Right.
high school,
Yep.
with the Cobra Kai guys and their motorcycles and Cruel Summer, not the Taylor Swift version, but the Bananarama version
Right.
of as playing. Like that's what it was like. We went from being in this little country school with like 22 kids in our classroom to being sent to Middletown where we were outnumbered,
Yeah.
outgunned,
Not
outclassed.
sophisticated. Yeah.
And it really and because I was a little bit higher, um you know how they
Just
put you in like the red group, the purple
oh,
group,
right,
you
right.
know?
They try to jazz it up with colors, but really they were trying to tell you
Like the smart
academically
group,
where
the
you felt.
dumb
Okay,
group,
I was
the
gonna say,
middle,
"Oh, you're maroon? Oh, okay."
Long
Yeah.
story short, I ended up it was as if I moved to a new school.
Mm,
And now these kids are wearing like jams and Ocean Pacific clothes. Jams are like these long shorts that were
mm.
really popular.
Anybody who
OP
doesn't
was
remember jam
Ocean
season?
Pacific, and I'm wearing Kmart.
Yeah.
I'm wearing my Kmart
James
clothes.
Way, Ames. Yeah.
And so that changed me a little bit. But at 10, I was this sweet, gentle, um, like a lamb being led into the slaughter,
Yeah.
let's say.
So you learned a lot. Middle school was transformational for you.
Yeah, I'm not sure in a good way.
Yeah.
I'm not sure in a good way. And what's funny is the older I get, the more I realize that I'm still the 10-year-old kid. Like I just recently took a personality test.
Agreed.
And
Yes.
so um I don't want to be a nice vanilla introvert. I want to be exciting and dangerous and daring and suave, but I'm not. I'm still the 10-year-old sweet kid, but I sometimes you have to fake things. Fake it till you make it. I'm not
Every
sure it's
day.
great advice, but I'm sure I've tried it.
Yeah. That's so in that sort of transition, because you know who you are, and that's awesome, and you're still that person. You must have had sort of an inner voice that like followed you around, or maybe it was somebody that you knew or somebody you didn't, or who is that?
Yeah, I think the inner voice is and if you get I'm a Christian, so the inner voice could also be the Holy Spirit. I'm not
Sure.
I don't know
Yeah.
if it's a spiritual thing or if it's just your true self. Um, but I think as a young man, our frontal cortex isn't developed until you're 25.
Or
And
a
so that
THC.
still
Yeah.
small voice is pretty quiet
Okay.
until then.
True.
But at a certain point, um, that voice shows up in the middle of the night, demanding to be heard and saying, "To thine own self be true. This is not who you are."
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing. I'm
Yeah.
sure it's kept me out of a lot of trouble.
Yeah. When's the last time you heard that voice?
Probably the last time I had too much to drink, a couple
Okay.
nights. Yeah.
Yes.
It tells
Yeah.
me
Give yourself that pep talk. You're like,
yeah.
not again, Matt. Not again. No. I think we all do. We all have this voice, that's for some people it's a grandparent or it's a parent or even to this day as adults we have these voices, but some of them are more innate to us, like our higher self and some of them are conditioning. So it's really interesting to see what really sort of shaped that personality coming in. So I know you were talking about your intern and about how you had these great conversations with somebody who was a little bit younger than you, but do you have impactful advice or has someone ever given you really impactful advice?
Yeah, I used to one of the cool things about the Daily Caller, which I haven't been there in a decade, but they had these things where they didn't really have an intern program. They didn't have an intern coordinator. But what they would do is they would bring in all the interns for this like lunch and learn. And they would have me each week would be a different person who would speak to them. And so I would give them advice. And the best piece of advice that I've ever heard was not actually given to me. I read it. And I think it's by I think it's from Angela Duckworth, who is an author. But the advice is choose easy, work hard. And I think I've applied this to my life and I've given this out as advice to a lot of people. And it's so important. Choose easy, work hard, right? And so whether it's a relationship or a job, if you choose easy, which is like something that comes naturally to you, you don't have to get marriage counseling before you're on your second
Right.
date.
Right.
Um, it's easy. You like the job. It's fun from day one. It's not a struggle. And you still work hard. If you do those two things, you could be great. If you only have one, if you choose hard but you work hard, you could survive, but you're treading water.
Burning out. You're
Um,
burning out. Yeah.
but if you have if you have none, if you're 0 for 2, it's gonna it's destined for failure.
Yeah.
But if you get both, you can be great. If you choose easy, choose a spouse or a career, whatever, that just comes naturally, and then you still give it, you still work really hard, then you can be great. And so I just think that that's a big wow. That
That's
alone, if you just did that,
what a
you'd
great
probably
formula. What a
probably
great
do pretty
formula.
well in life.
And acknowledging what's a need or what's natural to you and then working your ass off, right?
Yeah, because I
Is
do think
there
a lot of times we want something that isn't right for us, and so we choose hard. We choose something that
Yeah.
looks shiny, looks cool, but it isn't really right for us.
Yeah.
But if you, so it has to be right for you, and if it's right for you, it'll probably be pretty easy. But then you still have to work really hard at it.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think sometimes just like you and I had talked about, what you're exposed to, what is possibly not anything what your legacy is may not even be in front of you yet. You don't even know what's coming down the way yet.
Yeah.
Now, you and I have a little bit of time, a little longer in the tooth and the career and some of the things we've chosen. Do you think you're creating a legacy?
Well, first, I think the biggest legacy that I probably will create just is as a father, um, because let's be honest. Unless you're, I mean, I'm a writer, but like unless you're Ernest Hemingway, um, no one's going to really be reading your stuff 100 years from now, even if you're a best-selling author. The odds, so, um, but if you're a parent, you are, there's a there's a pretty good chance I've got two boys that things I teach them today will be passed along, and that I could have some reach into the 22nd century or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Or at least
Um,
these photos that we're gonna put up there. We're
yes.
gonna see these for a long time. Go Yes.
So that's part of it. I would say that if I do have a legacy,
Yeah.
like, okay, as a writer, like someone who writes, you're always looking for a narrative, right?
Yeah.
So like, well, I'm thinking like if I were writing my obituary, by the way, sometimes this narrative is a little bit exaggerated. You know what I
Okay.
mean? You
Yeah.
find something that's true, but you make it a little bigger, than it is.
You
So
leave room for curiosity, right? You leave room for interpretation. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so if I were, it's a tendency anyway. So if I were writing my obituary, I think my legacy would have to be being a conservative who stood up against Donald Trump.
Wow.
Like that's the story, right? I
Wow.
mean, if
Yeah.
I'm trying to write an obituary that makes this guy who's not a hero
Right.
seem like a hero, who isn't really that important, seem important, that's probably the story I write. I write about this guy, Matt Lewis, who was from day one,
Mm.
a conservative who was at a conservative outlet, who uh, took chances,
Yeah.
could have been dangerous, possibly standing up to Trump. And I think my book, Too Dumb to Fail, which came out in January of 2016, could be considered the first anti-Trump conservative book or the first never Trump book
That was a
um,
chance. That
that
was a
was
real
ever
chance when you
published.
put that out there. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of it's just by happenstance. You start writing a book a year or two before it gets published. But So if I were like stretching to make Matt Lewis have a legacy as a writer, I
Yeah.
think that's the obituary that I
Is that it?
write. I think
What's
so.
is that book in you right now?
The book, what book?
Chapter 2, Too Dumb to Fail. Is that Too Dumb to Fail 2? What does it look like?
Too Smart to Win.
Too Smart to Win. I like that. No, that's perfect. Yeah.
um, I think you definitely could write a sequel to it,
Okay.
obviously, because I mean, it's almost it's going to be a decade old
Yes.
next year. It's 9 years
And
old, so
another
yeah,
reunion in your life. Another reunion is that book.
yeah.
I think you have so much to offer, and I invite you not to shrink and even jump into that second book because that sounds really good. Because I have learned, as someone who's not political, or even well versed in political history, I have learned so much for in our basic discussions and times working out together about how important different players have been and things that maybe weren't even written down in history for us to experience in our textbooks. But you're an educator, and I hope you see yourself in that capacity, that you are an educator teaching people and asking people to expand, right? To not shrink, to think of these situations in a broader stroke, and also inviting people to align how they feel and not just taking things at face value. If it doesn't feel right to you, don't shrink, say something, be who you are. And just because that might not align with your origin or the folks that you grew up with, that's really compelling, and I appreciate all the education you've offered me, because I agree, I came out of a very rural, conservative, upbringing, and I don't think until you and I had some very specific conversations about pieces in history I wasn't aware of, that I even realized that I was a crunchy con and that
Oh, wow.
I really care about recycling, and these things really matter to me and
Yeah.
generations beyond because these are the highlights we need. These are the things we need, and I think you have a huge opportunity to keep educating and keep telling people to see what really aligns with them.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do think I like teaching. I mean, which implies I know a lot, which I don't necessarily know a lot, but the best way to learn is to teach, I've found too. And so that's the thing. As a writer, um, I get to teach, but it forces me, you have to stay one lesson ahead of your audience, right?
True,
Ahead of
true. Yes.
ahead of the students.
3 reps that don't count backwards. We'll talk about that later. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and let me say, we used to work out together, and you will tell if you are, you know, if you're exercising, you're jogging with somebody, the conversations you're going to have are pretty intimate, and that person's going to really learn and know you. And it's funny. I don't know if I ever told you this. I used to get my haircut in the basement of this pretty dank building in downtown DC, and my barbers were these two really old guys. And one of them passed away, and he was this old Italian guy. He fought in World War II. Um, and he used to be Jack Kent Cook's, the owner of the Washington Redskins. He was his barber, and when Jack Kent Cook died, and there was this big controversy over whether his son would take over the team or Dan Snyder was going to get to
Mhm.
buy the team.
Mhm.
And I forget the details of why there was a controversy, but long story short, my barber got what is it, subpoenaed. He was forced to appear in court and to testify. And the
Right?
reason is that they believed that Jack Kent Cook might tell his barber something that he wouldn't have told anybody else. And so I think whether it's talking to your barber or talking to somebody that you're working out with,
Yeah.
sometimes I bet you know things that my wife doesn't know.
Oh, I have to tell you that I have commented that I have lived 1,000 lifetimes and 1,000 experiences that were not my own, just based on the experiences and the relationships I had working with all the people that I did. I never wanna be a politician, and that's mostly because the experience I had working with politicians and
Yeah.
some of the things that they had to jump and hurdle, and personal and family and work, and it's not something that I would want as part of my story, and It's incredible. It's incredible, and I appreciate the experience of spending time with you and Aaron as well. Um, you learn so much. You learn to, appreciate everybody's upbringing and who they are and really get to know them, and it's been an incredible gift for me, so thank you. Um, Matt also has a podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about your podcast?
Yeah, I've actually been podcasting for like 15 years, believe it or not. It's been a long journey and I find it super rewarding. But yeah, check it out. You can go to my YouTube, Matt Lewis and the News, or listen to the audio pod, which called Matt Lewis Can't Lose, both of which are
Good.
80s pop
Yes,
culture
references, we
references.
see it. Well, I will make sure that we link all of Matt's
Thank
information
you.
in here in the show notes, but Matt, is there anything you want people to know when it comes to, shrinking or not shrinking in their own life?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say it's a constant struggle, but to find out who you really are and what you really believe. And so, just to sort of finish that one story, after I worked at Roy Rogers, I got involved in political campaigns. I ended up working at a nonprofit where I got to travel around the country for 4 years, training conservatives how to run for public office. And I thought that I loved political campaigns and that I wanted, to do political campaigns for a living. And I ended up moving to North Dakota. The first 10 days I was there,
Commitment.
the wind chill was 80
Commitment.
below
Yeah.
zero.
Yes.
It was a rough year. We lost that election. My dad died that year. Um, and that's at a certain point, it hit me that I had two things. One, I didn't really remember when I told you I spent 4 years teaching people? I loved that job, but it wasn't because I loved politics. It was because I loved teaching people. And so I learned
Obviously.
that
Yeah.
about myself. But the
Yeah.
part about not shrinking is, that I had seen myself. I had this vision of myself as this sort of slick Republican political operative who was going to be, the West Wing kind of guy. And I had this vision that that's who I was. But that's not really who I was. I was more like political operatives are a certain type of person. And I was too contrarian. I was too artistic, too sensitive, really,
Yeah.
probably to be that. And that's when I discovered that writing about politics was way more fun and revolutionary and contrarian and artistic
Kinda
and that
romantic too, right?
and
You have this.
romantic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that fit me more. But it was at the age of 30 really that I figured this out, and it took me years to weasel my way in,
Yes.
to
Yep.
getting paid to do it.
Oof.
So,
That's amazing.
keep finding out who you are, and in my case, it took me at least till I was 30. So
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. And you are not your political party. You are not exactly who other people tell you are, and you're a great testament to that. Find out who you are, align with what matters to you, and Matt, thanks for joining us. That was a lot of fun, and thanks for having me on that podcast 200 years ago too, because that was a lot of fun for me.
it
That
was
might have
awesome.
sparked why I'm here in the podcast world now. So
Thank
thanks
you.
so much for joining us. Thanks for joining Don't F***ing Shrink. We'll talk to you soon.